I grew up in a house where ambition was spoken of like it was a luxury, the kind of thing only rich people could afford to have. My parents weren't poor in the strictest sense. We had food on the table and a roof. That didn't leak, but every dollar was pinched, every purchase judged, and every dream treated as though it was an indulgence. From the time I was young, I wanted to be a doctor. Not because of prestige, not because of the paycheck, but because I remembered sitting in waiting rooms with my grandmother, watching her cough and struggle to breathe, while the staff treated her like a number. I wanted to be the opposite of that. I wanted to build a place where people felt human again. Of course, when I told my parents that, they laughed. My father smirked over his newspaper and said, "Doctors come from families with money. Do you see us with money?" My mother sighed, stirring her tea, and muttered, "Maybe you should think of something more realistic. Pharmacy tech, maybe. Nursing assistant. Something safe. Something shorter." But I was stubborn. I always was. And once the idea of medicine rooted itself in me, nothing could tear it out. High school became a battlefield. I stayed up late, scribbling notes under the thin light of a desk lamp, while Kayla, my cousin, who lived with us for years, was allowed to go out with friends, watch movies, and do what she wanted. When I earned straight A's, my parents would nod, barely impressed. When Kayla got a B and cried about it, she was comforted, hugged, and given ice cream. Favoritism didn't just sting. It hollowed me out. It sent me the message that even excellence would never earn me, more than silence in that house. So I learned early that if I wanted to achieve something, it would have to be without applause. I got into college on a scholarship, though it barely scratched the surface of tuition and living costs. My parents couldn't contribute. So I worked jobs that shredded me, waiting tables until midnight, scrubbing bathrooms at a local gym before dawn, and tutoring kids whose parents drove nicer cars than I'd ever seen up close. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I lived on instant noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and determination. Medical school was worse. The long nights of memorizing anatomy terms and running between classes would have destroyed me. If not for the tiny flame of anger I carried inside, the anger at being doubted, ignored, and dismissed. That anger was fuel. It burned every time I remembered my father's laugh when I said I wanted to be a doctor. The day I graduated was anticlimactic. My classmates celebrated with champagne and family photos. My parents didn't come. They sent a text that read, "Congratulations, we're busy." I stood in my cap and gown, holding my diploma with trembling hands, and felt a strange mix of triumph and grief. I had done it, alone, and I realized then, maybe that was my destiny, to fight, to build, to claw my way up without anyone clapping for me. After graduation came residency. Long, grueling hours in hospitals where senior doctors barked orders and patients screamed in pain. I learned to run on coffee and adrenaline, to ignore my own exhaustion, to keep moving even when my hands shook from fatigue. But I also learned something else. Compassion mattered. Patients lit up when you remembered their names, when you asked about their children, when you knelt to their level and explained instead of ordering. That was the seed of what would become my clinic. When residency ended, I could have joined an established hospital. The paycheck would have been safe, the path secure. But I kept remembering my grandmother, sitting in that waiting room, ignored. I wanted to build something different. I wanted to create a place where no one felt invisible. That's how I found myself standing in front of a crumbling little building on the edge of town. Paint peeling, roof sagging, weeds clawing up the sides. The landlord looked at me skeptically. "You really want this dump? It's been vacant for years." I nodded. "I'll take it." I signed the lease with shaking hands. My bank account was nearly empty. I had student loans breathing down my neck. Everyone I knew told me I was insane. "Clinics like that don't last," they said. "Hospitals will crush you. You're wasting your degree." But I didn't care. I saw past the peeling paint. I saw walls that could hold hope. I saw rooms where people could heal. The early days were brutal. I painted those walls myself, often at 3 a.m. after long shifts. I scrubbed floors, repaired cabinets, begged local businesses for secondhand furniture. My first exam table was a donation from a retiring doctor who shook his head and said, "You're brave." Or foolish. Maybe both. When I opened the doors, I had no staff. Just me, an empty waiting room, and a flickering open sign I had bought off eBay. My first patient was an elderly man who needed his blood pressure checked. My second was a young mother whose child had a sprained wrist. That was it. 2 patients on my first day. But when I locked up that night, turning the key in the old rusted door, I felt something I had never felt before. Ownership. Pride. The space was mine. Flaws and all. Word spread slowly. A friend told a friend. A neighbor brought their cousin. Patients trickled in. Sometimes I didn't make enough in a day to cover electricity. Other times, I treated people for free because they couldn't afford even my reduced rates. My stomach twisted each time I looked at my dwindling account balance, but my heart soared when patients smiled in relief. It wasn't glamorous. I ate meals on the clinic floor, often falling asleep there when I was too tired to go home. I showered in the staff bathroom, washed my laundry at a 24-hour laundromat, lived off coffee and stubbornness. My friends were going on vacations, posting photos of weddings and parties, while I was sweeping floors and calculating whether I could afford new gauze packs. And my family? Silence. They didn't visit. They didn't ask. They didn't help. When I called once to tell them about a small success, a local blogger had written a nice review. My father chuckled. So what? Call me when you're running a real hospital. My mother said, maybe you should think about quitting before you embarrass yourself. I hung up the phone, tears burning my eyes, and sat in the dark clinic lobby surrounded by walls I had painted myself. For a moment, doubt suffocated me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was wasting my life. But then the door chimed and a patient walked in. She was an elderly woman, hunched over, clutching her chest. I helped her sit, examined her, reassured her. She left with medicine and a smile, her hand squeezing mine as she whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." No one else would. That was all I needed. Every moment of exhaustion, every meal skipped, every sneer from my family. It all faded when I remembered why I started. I wasn't building this clinic for applause. I was building it because people deserved better. And I swore no matter how hard it got, I wouldn't stop. The first 2 years of the clinic were like standing in a storm with no umbrella. Some days I wondered if I would drown under the weight of it all. Bills stacked up like enemies. The electricity company didn't care that I was helping uninsured patients. The bank didn't care that I had a dream. And every time I scraped together enough to pay one debt, another one popped up, grinning like a new adversary ready to fight. But slowly, like grass forcing its way through cracks in the pavement, the clinic began to grow. It started with a handful of patients who whispered to their neighbors, "There's a doctor downtown who listens, who doesn't rush, who actually cares." Then a mother came back with her sister, then with her cousin, then with her grandmother. One man I treated for a minor infection returned months later with 3 of his coworkers. "Doc, you're the only one we trust," he said. By the 3rd year, the waiting room that had once echoed with emptiness was now crowded. Patients sat shoulder to shoulder, babies crying, old men shuffling with canes, teenagers scrolling on their phones while waiting for checkups. I often had to stand in the doorway and apologize. "It'll be a long wait today." But instead of complaints, I heard, "It's worth it. We'll wait." That faith kept me alive. I hired my first nurse, a woman named Clara who had a laugh like sunshine and a work ethic to match. She noticed how I skipped lunch and started sneaking me sandwiches. "You'll collapse before the patients do," she warned. Later, I added another nurse, then a receptionist, then a part-time janitor. Each new hire felt like I was adding bricks to a foundation that had once been sand. Yet even as my professional world grew, my personal one shrank. My friends drifted away, tired of my constant excuses. "Come out with us," they'd beg. But how could I explain that every hour out was an hour lost? An hour where a patient might come and find the doors locked? Soon the invitation stopped. Family was worse. When I called home, my parents rarely picked up. When they did, it was the same script. "Still at that little clinic?" Dad would ask, mocking the word little like it was a curse. Mom's voice would follow, bored. "You work too much." "What's the point if you're always tired?" One Thanksgiving, I begged them to come visit. Just once, I said. See what I've built. They promised they would, then canceled the night before. Kayla has a recital, Mom explained. Kayla, always Kayla, the golden one. The reason, the excuse, the center of their world. I stopped asking after that. But I kept building. By year 5, we expanded into the empty building next door. The walls still smelled of mildew, but I painted over them, hung bright posters about nutrition and wellness, and turned those rooms into exam spaces. Patients marveled at the growth. Doc, you're really making something here. The community began to trust me in ways I hadn't expected. People came not just for checkups, but for advice, for comfort. An old woman dropped off cookies every month. A mechanic I'd treated for a back injury insisted on fixing my car for free. A florist sent fresh flowers for the reception desk. It felt like the clinic wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone. Still, loneliness gnawed at me. Nights were long. I often slept at the clinic, head resting on piles of files, the hum of the fridge lulling me into shallow rest. The staff became my family in a way my blood never had. Clara once joked, "We should just move cots in here, since you practically live here anyway." I laughed, but the truth stung. Every milestone passed without a word from my parents. When I bought my first new diagnostic machine, I texted them a photo. No reply. When we hit the mark of treating our 1,000th patient, I left a voicemail, silence. But when Kayla posted a photo of herself buying a new dress, my parents flooded it with comments. "So proud of you." "Beautiful as always." "Our star." I learned to stop reaching. Instead, I poured everything into the clinic. I organized free health camps on weekends, handing out vitamins and running checkups for people who had never seen a doctor. I visited schools, teaching kids about hygiene and nutrition. I walked through shelters, offering free consultations. Word spread faster now. Local papers wrote about the young doctor changing lives. I clipped those articles, pinned them to the clinic bulletin board, and told myself they were enough. But at night, when the patients were gone and the staff had left, I sat in my office staring at the phone, wondering why it never rang with their voices. Sometimes I imagined my father saying, "I was wrong. You made it." Sometimes I dreamed of my mother walking through the clinic doors, hugging me saying, "We're proud of you." But dreams were fragile, and in the morning, I woke up to the same silence. By the 7th year, success could no longer be ignored. The clinic wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Our waiting list stretched weeks ahead. Insurance companies finally started partnering with us. Donations trickled in. I even received an award from the mayor for outstanding community service. I should have felt triumphant. And part of me did. But another part of me ached. Because when I looked into the crowd that night, holding my award, there were no familiar faces. No family clapping. No parents smiling proudly. Just Clara and the staff, cheering louder than anyone. That night, I whispered to myself, maybe this is my family now. Maybe this is enough. And for a while it was. But I should have known. Success has a way of drawing out shadows. And when the spotlight finally turned my way, it drew out the shadows of my bloodline too. It started with a newspaper article. A local journalist had been running a series about small businesses making a difference. And one of Clara's patients recommended us. The piece was simple, just 2 pages tucked in the community section. But it changed everything. The headline read, "Doctor builds clinic from scratch, now serves thousands." The photo beneath it showed me in my white coat, stethoscope slung around my neck, standing in front of the clinic doors. Clara and the staff were smiling in the background, and patients filled the waiting room. The story painted me as someone who had beaten the odds, who had worked with nothing but determination to create something real. That morning, the phone didn't stop ringing. Local radio wanted an interview. A charity asked if we'd host a free vaccination drive. Patients came in saying, "We read about you. We're so proud." But what struck me most was the first text I received from my mother in years. "We saw the article. Amazing. We always knew you could do it." I stared at the screen, my chest tight. They hadn't called when I opened the clinic. They hadn't called when I expanded, or when I won awards, or when I begged them to see what I had built. But now, after a stranger put it in print, they suddenly remembered I existed. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. In the end, I just wrote, "Thanks." That single word opened a floodgate. Within days, relatives I hadn't heard from in a decade popped up. Cousins, uncles, aunts, all suddenly proud, all suddenly remembering my number. "We're so proud of you. You've done so well for yourself. We should meet and talk business sometime." Business, always business. At first, I thought maybe it was genuine pride. Maybe they had finally seen me. But then came the dinner. My parents invited me home, their voices sugary sweet. I almost didn't go, but some small part of me, that same child who once longed for their applause, hoped it would be different this time. The house hadn't changed. Same chipped tiles, same faded curtains. Kayla's photos still filled the walls. Her graduation, her recitals, her vacations. My diploma wasn't there. My article wasn't there. We sat at the table. My mother served roast chicken, smiling too wide. My father cleared his throat, his tone rehearsed. "You know," he said, "this clinic of yours, it's really a family legacy." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "A family legacy?" "Yes," my mother chimed in brightly. "Your uncle could help with finances. Your cousins could take care of admin. We can all benefit from the profits. It should stay in the family." The chicken turned to ash in my mouth. "None of you built this," I said slowly. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Families share?" My blood boiled. Families share? Where was that spirit when I was painting walls at 3 a.m.? When I begged for a loan to cover rent and they laughed? When I was eating ramen while Kayla got new dresses? Still, I stayed quiet. I wanted to hear how far they'd take it. Over the next weeks, their visits became frequent. Uncles dropping by the clinic, just to see how things are run. Cousins wandering the halls, asking staff casual questions. One cousin, Greg, even handed me a resume with a smirk. Figured I'd take over admin. "Free up your time." I glanced at the paper. No degree, no experience. But he acted as though the job was already his. Another uncle sat across from me in the clinic cafe one morning, sipping free coffee like he owned the place. "I've been thinking," he said, lowering his voice. "I'll take 20% ownership. In exchange, I'll, support you." I nearly laughed. "Support me how?" He grinned, oily and smug. "By being family." The audacity choked me. At Sunday dinner a few weeks later, the mask dropped completely. My parents, cousins, uncles, they cornered me. "You've done well because of us," one cousin sneered. "We supported you growing up." I slammed my fist on the table. "Supported me? I begged you for help and you turned me away. You laughed when I asked for loans. You didn't even come to my graduation." My father's face darkened. He slammed his fist back, rattling the dishes. "We're not asking. We're telling you. You will make this a family business." The room went silent. I looked around at them, the greedy eyes, the hungry stares, the expectant smirks. They saw my clinic not as a dream, not as a lifeline for thousands of patients, but as a goldmine to carve up. In that moment, something inside me hardened. They thought they could waltz in after years of silence and take without ever paying a dime. They had no idea who they were dealing with. For weeks after that disastrous Sunday dinner, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from cousins, texts from uncles, even Kayla chiming in with cheerful little messages like, "We're all so excited to be part of the clinic now. It'll be fun working together." Working together? I nearly threw my phone across the room. The nerve of them. I thought back to the nights I'd eaten ramen while they hosted lavish family dinners without inviting me. The days I was scrubbing clinic floors alone while they told me to give up. The time I begged for a loan and my father laughed. And now, after years of silence, they wanted to ride in like royalty and claim thrones they never built. No. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. But it wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, surgical, precise. I started with the paperwork. I spent hours with a lawyer I trusted, drawing up airtight documents. We created a trust, every asset, every account. Every brick of that clinic was folded into it with me as the sole trustee. The bylaws were rewritten so no one, not even a blood relative, could touch ownership without my explicit consent. We locked down bank accounts with multi-step verification. Clara loyal as ever. agreed to co-sign critical decisions so no one could trick their way in. Each night I worked late, the smell of coffee and ink filling my office. While my family thought I was bending to their pressure, I let them believe it. I even sent vague texts like, "Still considering your ideas." It was bait, and they swallowed it whole. When everything was secured, I made my move. I invited them all to the clinic for a family business meeting. They arrived dressed like peacocks, shiny suits, bright dresses. Kayla in designer heels that clicked on the clinic tiles. They carried notebooks, resumes, and in my father's case, a smug grin. "Finally," he said, patting my shoulder like I was a child, "you're seeing reason." We gathered in the conference room. My staff stayed outside. But Clara stood by the door, arms crossed, her presence both a shield and a witness. I placed a thick folder on the table. The room hushed. "These," I began, my voice steady, "are the numbers. 7 years, 14-hour days, nights spent sleeping on clinic floors. Loans I repaid alone, sacrifices none of you saw, blood, sweat, and tears you never cared to notice. And every single one of you told me I would fail." My uncle coughed. Kayla looked away. I opened the folder, sliding documents across the table. "This clinic belongs to me, legally, permanently. Every account. Every building, every chair in the waiting room, it's mine. I've secured it in a trust. There is no path for you to take ownership. None." My father's face flushed red. "Don't be ridiculous. We're family." I met his gaze, cold exactly. "And when I needed family, you weren't there." "So now, neither am I," murmurs rose. One cousin stammered, but we can help. We can make it bigger." "Where were you when I couldn't afford gauze?" and I snapped. "Where were you when I was eating instant noodles every night? Where were you when I begged for help and you laughed?" Silence, heavy, crippling. I stood gathering the documents back into the folder. "This meeting is over." They exploded then, shouts of selfishness, curses, accusations. My father bellowed that I was ungrateful. My mother wept crocodile tears. Kayla pouted like a child denied candy. But I walked out. Clara at my side, the noise fading behind us. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly. The fallout was swift. Some relatives stopped speaking to me entirely. Others tried guilt-tripping texts. "Family is all you have. Don't push us away." A few threatened lawsuits until they realized they had no legal ground. But patients kept coming. The clinic kept thriving. My real family, the staff, the community, stood by me. When word spread that relatives had tried to steal the clinic, patients rallied around me. One even said, "Don't you dare let them touch this place. Doc, this clinic belongs to us too." I smiled at that. Because they were right. Kayla eventually sold the BMW she'd once flaunted online. Last I heard, she complained constantly about money. My parents grew quieter, their pride dimmed. They never apologized, but they never dared ask again. Years later, I stood in the clinic's expanded lobby. The walls were bright, the chairs new, the staff bustling. A little boy tugged at my sleeve, smiling up at me after I gave him a lollipop. His mother mouthed, "Thank you." And I thought of that old house, that dinner table where my father had slammed his fist, demanding I share. I thought of my mother's silence, my cousin's smirks, the greed in their eyes, and I realized something. Sometimes family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your struggle. I built this clinic from scratch, brick by brick, patient by patient, sacrifice by sacrifice. And when the people who abandoned me came crawling back, demanding a piece without ever paying a dime, I didn't just say no, I locked the doors behind them. Because true legacy isn't inherited, it's earned.